Welcome to another satisfying movie recap. Let's begin!
The movie starts with a melodious song. A little girl Eve playing on the beach. Her mother Eileen is also with her. Their time of joy and happiness is interrupted by violence. Soldiers are firing and getting killed. After a moment everything changed and Eileen opened her eyes in a room with no windows and door. She is in an unfamiliar place. She called up loudly for help. She had no idea about where she was. She can only hear a voice through a speaker that stated her to move the pencil. It was a task which too was performed by Eileen. It was an AI voice known as the administrator. The administrator said her to complete the task in the allowed time. She doesn't figure out what was going on. She hears a sound that said begin and the light in the room turned red. A table was placed in front of Eileen. The pencil was on the table. Eileen stood up from her chair and moved the pencil. The administrator declares that the task had been completed. Eileen tried to ask where she was, but a buzzer rang and she fainted. Eileen sees a dream where she was on a beach. She is woken up by the administrator. She is chained to a chair and she can't move. The administrator started the next task and said Eileen to move the pencil. Eileen was chained up and her wrists were also tied. This makes Eileen panic. She began to cry. To make her comply with the rules and game, the administrator told her that if she didn't complete the task her daughter would die. By listening to her daughter, memories began to recall in Eileen's mind. She began to remember her time with her daughter on the beach. Eileen finally remembered that the little girl is Eve, her daughter. By remembering her daughter, Eileen becomes furious and she began to ask about her daughter, but the administrator doesn't reply to her. This made no choice other than to complete the task. She began to think about how she could move. She came up with an idea and started to untie her hand by using her mouth. She tried, but she can't cut the rope with her mouth. She came up with another idea and she takes off her shoe. She tied her shoes and throws them toward the pencil. This worked and moved the pencil. She had completed the task and the lights were turned back to blue from red. The buzzer rings and Eileen were again knocked out. Eileen was seeing a dream again. This time she can see clearly. She was sitting on a chair at the beach and her daughter Eve was playing with the sand. Eve was singing a song and she said that the sand is also singing with her. She asked her mother to join her. Eileen lays down on the ground and started to sing with her daughter. Eileen lay on the ground and fall asleep in the dream. When she woke up, she was sleeping on the floor of the room just like she was sleeping on the beach. Eileen notices that her chains were gone and she was set free. She looked through the room. Her food was on the table. Glop was on the plate with a spoon. Eileen was having a headache and it was irresistible. The lights were blue and there was no task. She used her free time and carefully inspects the room. She went through the walls and every corner of the room but didn't find any gap in the wall. The room was properly locked and there was no slightest gap. She moved through the room, inspected the whole room. She checked the chair and table. They were also bolted to the floor properly. She finally turned towards the food and started to try the food. At first, she hesitated, but as soon as she tasted the food she realizes that the food was delicious. She was hungry and she finished the food in no time. She looked through the plate. The tray gives a clear reflection of her. She looked her face in it and gets upset while looking at herself. Her face doesn't look healthy to her and she thinks about herself. She puts the tray aside and sits on the chair in a bended knee position. She was in fear. As she moved her fingers through her hair, she felt a scar on his head. She pleaded with them to set her free, but no one replied. She began to cry and can see a glimpse of Eve running at the beach. The administrator woke her and started to initiate the next task. Eileen was angry she didn't listen. The administrator again threats her that if she didn't complete the task her daughter Eve would die. She didn't believe the administrator and refused to perform the task. She said that she wanted to confirm whether Eve was with them. At first, the administrator refused, but she didn't seem to comply with the rules, after which the administrator agreed and hears Eve's voice. Eve said that she was scared and that she needed her. Eileen asked Eve if they hurt her, but her voice was gone. Administrator replied that she will remain unharmed until she performed the task. The administrator again said her to move the pencil, which was the task. But this time an unbreakable glass panel appeared between Eileen and the pencil. She tried to break the glass. She even tried to pick up the chair, but it was bolted to the ground. She screamed and tried, but the glass didn't break. She came near the glass and started to yell at the pencil to move. She yelled so angrily that the pencil moved from its place. Before she can figure that what happened, the buzzer rang and she fainted. She was again in her dream and she reached the beach. This time she notices a bleeding mark on her forehead. Eve was playing with the sand. She invited her mother to help her in building the sand castle. Eileen moved forward to help Eve, but as she moved, she heard a male voice. He was calling his name and shrugged his shoulder. Eileen woke up and was again chained to a chair. The bleeding mark also appeared on her forehead. A man is lying on the floor. Eileen looked toward him. The man woke up and called her name. It seemed that he knows her. He came near to Eileen. Eileen was scared of him. He tried to come near, but Eileen was scared and freaked out. Eileen pushed her away as she thinks he was from her captors. He told Eileen that he was her husband, Roger. Eileen looked toward him as she was trying to remember him. She also had a flash of him on the beach memory. Eileen remembered him and told him that she doesn't know what was going on. Roger makes her comfortable and asked her to remain calm. Eileen asked Roger how he came here, but Roger also doesn't remember anything and cannot be told how he ended up here. Eileen told her about the administrator's voice and that if she didn't perform the task, administrator would kill their daughter Eve. Roger was in shock and the administrator directed the next task to break the pencil and the lights turned red. Roger yelled at Eileen to know what this was. Eileen replied that she only knows that she had to complete the task. Roger in a hurry picked up the pencil, but an alarm began to ring and said that only Eileen can perform the task. Eileen asked Roger to put the pencil back. Roger tried to take out her chair and yelled at Eileen, which made her furious. She concentrates on the pencil. She told Roger to shut up in anger and the pencil broke down into pieces. Roger is surprised and he notices that Eileen's ears are bleeding. As Eileen was noticing her ears, the buzzer knocks her out.
Just a quick reminder, please subscribe for more videos. We appreciate the support. Back to the video.
The beach dream started, but this time they were not alone. Roger was also with them singing the song. When Eileen woke up, food was waiting for them on the table. Roger was searching the room and finding any way out. Eileen points out that he was wasting his time. Eileen expressed her wish that he should help her to complete the task so that they can save their daughter Eve. But it seems like Roger didn't trust them and said that he can't trust these people as they never keep their promises. Roger also brings up the subject that Eileen had special power, but Eileen didn't agree. Roger recalled a memory of Eve's birthday when they both fought. Eileen had visuals of her dream where she sees that they both fought. She realizes that they have been fighting most of the time. By listening to this, Roger calmed down. He became a little supportive and helped Eileen to stand up from the chair. Eileen drank water and after that, she lay down on the floor. She was ignoring Roger and tried to sleep. Roger asked her to eat something, but she ignored it. She reached back to her dream where she was also lying on the floor. Eve came near to her and wondered why she was looking tired and why she leaves her alone. Eileen promises her that she will not leave her alone. Eve asked about her father, and as she asked, she disappeared from Eileen's eye. Eileen was alone yelling her name. Eileen woke up and was again chained. She was in a panic, but Roger helped her to remain calm. Eileen was having headaches again. She told about the headache to Roger. When Roger checked his head, he confirmed with her about the scar and told her that something was implanted under her skin. They were discussing the implications. Another test began to start and the lights turned red again. The administrator said that the task is to put the ball inside the bucket. A ball and a bucket were placed on the table. Eileen was exhausted from these experiments and began to complain. Roger reminds her of their daughter and motivates her to use her powers so that they can save their daughter. Eileen still doesn't believe in her powers and thinks it is a crazy idea. She said that if she had any powers, she can't control them. Roger had believed that Eileen had some special powers, and to find out in practice, he said that she should use her power on the screws that were keeping the table bolted to the floor. Eileen listened to him and started to try her powers. With practice, Eileen was able to control her powers, and she gradually opened the screws one by one. Roger pushed the table toward Eileen. She used her powers and put the ball in the bucket. Her ears again started to bleed. Later, Roger apologized to Eileen for his behavior. He blamed the situation and said that he was in stress due to the situation. Eileen accepts his apology and Roger started to talk jokes with Eileen about the food. This reminds Eileen of the jokes that he used to make with Eve. Eileen was back in her memory. It was Eve's birthday and they were on the beach because Eve loved the beach. Eileen and Eve spent time together and Roger spends most of the time sleeping instead of playing with her daughter. Eileen was mentioning this to Roger, but to avoid a fight, she doesn't mention the last fact to Roger. Roger was also talking with Eileen and he said that whatever they have implanted in her head is blocking all out. This brings them closer and from now they started to perform together. They worked together to complete tasks. Each task was becoming more difficult. but Eileen was passing them with concentration and Roger's help. Every time she used her powers, her ears bleed. Both of them provided the food on time to set them active and healthy. In the next task, things become complex and tense. The task was to put a gun together. Roger tried to help by reading the instruction manual and Eileen was putting the pieces tighter with her powers. Roger was nervous because he can't conclude the meaning behind the task. Roger started to fight, which made Eileen angry. She asked him to remain calm, but he started to interrupt and Eileen, by her powers, throws the manual aside and called her a control freak. This triggered another argument between them. They both started to argue. Eileen remembered that he argued on the beach also. Roger tried to apologize, but Eileen won't take that. It happened many times in the past. Eileen in anger finishes the gun and shoots, only managing to stop the bullet before it hurts Roger because she reminds her that to save Eve she needs Roger. The task was complete and the buzzer rang. Eileen was back in her dream. Eve was making her sand castle, which was half complete. Eve said that she can't complete the sand castle without her father. Roger was drinking. When he came closer, he destroyed the castle. He said that it was an accident, but his behavior was disrespectful, and by his expression, Eileen can't judge that it was an accident. When Eileen woke up, she didn't talk with Roger. She remained silent and just stared at the wall. Roger gets tensed by seeing her in that condition. Eileen said that she was feeling cold and Roger gave his jacket to her. Roger talked with her and convinced her to eat something. To make her feel better, he told all the jokes and all the fun things that they will do together once they found Eve. He encouraged Eileen to speak and talk with him, but Eileen can't recall her memories. Eileen had been studying to be a physics teacher and Roger worked in a band. But after Eve's birth, he started a job and was doing it. Hearing these things, Eileen laughed. Both of them apologized for their behavior. Eileen grabs water, but it was cold. She thinks of warm water. Suddenly the water gets warm. Eileen felt tired and she rested her head on Roger's lap, but before falling asleep she apologized to Roger for something, but she can't speak clearly. She slept and reached the beach in her memory. This time it was something new. She saw that something weird was buried in the sand. Eileen started to dig and she finds Roger's ring finger and Eve's sandal. She was in a panic, but before she can understand anything she suddenly falls back and sand began burying her. At that moment she woke up. She looked for Roger. He was trapped in a glass box that was slowly being filled with sand. She screamed, used her powers, and tried to break the glass, but it didn't work. She watches Roger dying under the sand. The administrator started to repeat the message of failure over and over. This makes her crazy. She screamed and used her powers, due to which the speakers break and fall to the ground. More memories of the beach started to flash. Suddenly soldiers entered the room. They tried to take Eileen, but she was angry, and with her powers, she killed the soldiers. She came out of the room. There was a monitor which indicates that test 0298 was still in progress. The scientist who was conducting the test were gone and their computers were also not present. More soldiers arrived and they started to shoot, but Eileen killed them all with her powers. She used the soldier's eye to scan it and opened the elevator. She reached a floor where test 0297 was completed. No one was there, so Eileen takes the elevator and returned. Here test 296 was also complete. She saw 3 weird doors in that room. In that room, she saw Roger, who was in fear. He mumbled that they are all like me. When Eileen asked what he meant, Roger pointed out at the door on which spares was written. Eileen opened the door. It contains all the stuff that was used in the tests and body clones of Roger that were ready to use in the next experiments. She checked the other door. They were also the same. More soldiers arrived, and Eileen showed no mercy and killed them. She takes their mask off. They were the same as Roger. They were his clones. She enters another room, but it was empty. It had only one light, which was right above Eileen. The administrator informs her that the test has been finished and she is successful. She said that she needed her daughter back, but the administrator replied that it was impossible because Eve had already gone. Eileen refused to believe, and the administrator disables the memory blocker which was implanted in her head. And finally, she remembered the beach. Eve and Eileen played all day at the beach. Roger didn't join them and slept all day, which made Eileen angry, and they started to argue. Eileen checked his bottle and discovered alcohol in it. She argued with Roger and Roger slapped Eileen. Eileen became angry and triggered her powers, which results that her killing Roger and Eve. The voice of Eve which she heard in the room was recreated. The administrator said that Eileen will be sent to reconditioning, which will erase her memories and dreams. Eileen realizes that her memories and dreams are the only sources by which she can keep Eileen alive. Eileen refused to go to reconditioning and is offered a deal. She wanted to go to tests again. Since they only provide testing and reconditioning, they agreed to her condition, and Eileen falls asleep as she sees herself on the beach with Eve singing her favorite song. Moments later, she woke up and was in the lab again on the first test to move the pencil, and she doesn't remember anything that she had been to. The movie ends with Eileen.
Thanks for watching Satisfying Movie Recap. See you on the next video.